What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. Okay, so, you guys read the title, and you may or may not have understood what I'm getting ready to talk about, because this is a fairly popular subject, and it's a subject of debate in the self-defense world. Honestly, with good reason. There are positive and negative things to this, because what this really is this is a technique for going about doing things in close proximity. So, okay, so threat focus or hard target focus. This is a subject of debate, and I'm going to get into it more. But before I go ahead and do that, I'm going to go ahead and describe the following facts. Okay, because there are facts that lead people towards their opinions on this, and I tend to subscribe to this line of thought to a point. Now, here are the facts. People, generally speaking, are biologically hardwired to be afraid as fuck of a couple of things. The first one is loud things. The second one is fast-moving things. And what people also tend to do is focus on loud and fast-moving things, especially if it's threatening posture from whatever that thing it is that you're focusing on. Now, here's the reason why. Back in the day, like the caveman days and the spear throwing days, loud and fast-moving things killed and ate you, predators. Okay, and we are frail, squishy little humans and stuff like that. So generally speaking, if it wasn't for the brain box up top, we'd be pretty easy to kill on a regular basis. We would have died out a long time ago. So also, back in those same days, we used to focus on an individual dangerous thing quite hard because, you know, as we were hunters and gatherers and stuff like that, whatever it was that these people would corner and try to kill for food and stuff was still quite dangerous, whatever it was. You know, even if it was like 30 people taking on like a mammoth or something, it's still a mammoth, so, and it can still very easily kill you. So people tend to focus on things that are dangerous to them as well. Now, in the modern era, the kill you and eat you thing does exist, but at a much lesser degree, obviously, because we're civilized and all of that stuff now. But what this translates to in this particular context is guns. Guns do all of those things, particularly pistols. Okay, now, pre-ignition push, pre-ignition grip, you know, trigger snatching and stuff like that, that is a person trying to control that fast-moving, loud thing that is a gun, that when people get into for the first time, like firearms, when they get into them for the first time, there's a reasonable amount of intimidation because they are loud and fast-moving things. Now, as dudes, there may be some people in the comments that are like, oh, I've never been afraid of guns, blah, blah, blah. Dude, that's not the point. The point is that one of the reasons for the pre-ignition push and grip and trigger press is because of that biological hardwiring. Because people tend to respond to stuff like that in one of two ways. It's either they are just afraid of it and they avoid it, or they try to control it and dominates its presence, its presence, so that it's not controlling them, they are controlling it. Now, the pre-ignition push, trigger press, and the pre-ignition grip and stuff like that, all of those things, it's a person trying to control what they're biologically hardwired to be like afraid of, right? And generally speaking, those aren't negative things if we're trying to like control recoil and really push into guns and shoot faster, but it becomes an issue if we're trying to place a super accurate shot. So, but what about the last thing? What about the focus on things part? People do that also. If you were to ask people that had been either in a force-on-force engagement, quote-unquote, or close quarters live gunfight, and ask them about their first experiences and stuff, most of the time, almost all the time, they would tell you, dude, I did not even pick up my sights, I just saw the guy, the gun was like magically there, and it just, and you know, pow, 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 and he wasn't a problem anymore after that, right? Well, this is something that we can actually use to our advantage because it's something that we automatically do, and that's focus on our threat, right? This is why statistically the most often thing shot in gunfights, rather actual gunfights or force on force type stuff, is like the hands. Because when I draw a gun and I point it right at you and I'm in a threatening posture, the first thing that's going to happen is that people will focus on the gun part, because that's the thing that can actually hurt them. You know, it's not the dude being retarded, it's the fact that he's got a gun in his hand, and a lot of people will focus right on that, and if they start shooting, they'll start shooting, but their hand-eye coordination kind of takes over. They're focusing on the gun part, and then the bullets just kind of magically find their way into the hands and forearms and stuff like that, and then the stuff behind it. What we can do is that we can actually use this to our advantage with something in the industry that's called a hard target focus or a threat focus, whichever term you want to use. The point is, it's you focusing on the bad guy. Sorry, I've been sick. But here's the thing. You focusing on that kind of defies a lot of previously established gun guy theory, in that for the longest time there was like this already established doctrine that was just kind of like focus on your front sight, focus on your front sight, focus on your front sight. There is nothing other than your front sight, right? That's not always the case, and the funny part is that a lot of those things that are a problem with front sight focus are not a problem with threat focus. For instance, that pre-ignition push and grip and like trigger snatch and stuff like that, yeah, that might widen your group a little bit, but generally speaking, you don't have to worry about lining up those sights as much. It's more of a hand-eye coordination thing. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come off camera and stuff like that, and I'm going to explain how I go about this and my purposes for it, and the context at which I would use this, and how I would try to groom myself into getting better with it, because there are real specific things that could make this very helpful to you, and there are real specific things that could make this a gigantic liability. Okay, because in no way am I against using your sights. I'm not. What I am saying is that within certain distances, the tiny amount of time that it takes to focus on your sights, you could have been using shooting that guy. Does that make sense? So we're going to go over that a little bit here, and then we're going to talk about the whys and when the gap kind of gets bridged between focusing on the bad guy and focusing on your sights, in this guy's opinion anyway. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I went and I got like a sticker, okay, and I pretty much covered up my front sight post and stuff so that you guys can tell I'm not actually using my front sight on this. Now, for a hard target focus, if you want to develop something like this, the biggest thing that I could say is that, like, if you have the capability to take off and then mount your sights again, or if you have like a build slide or something like that that doesn't have any sights at all, it keeps you from cheating for the most part, and then after a while you can just kind of do it yourself once you have more faith in it, honestly, because that's what everything takes now in the gun guy industry. We don't just try things, it requires faith to be established. But what you're doing is you're focusing very hard with both eyes open on the actual target that you're shooting, okay? And you want to start pretty close to start, just to figure out exactly where you're at, and you can start shooting fairly slow to figure out where you're at. But what I would say to do is to just go ahead and draw, focus just on that target, and then as you draw, just get to what is natural for your extension and fire the shot. Now you can fire 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever, and just to see where you're kind of at, because this does require hand-eye coordination, obviously. And after you fire the first couple of rounds, to get a feel for how weird this is to start, and honestly it really is weird at first, because for the longest time I was just like right in the sights and stay there and constantly stay there. So the first couple of drills is going to be kind of weird. I say to just kind of get the weirdness over with, fire a couple of rounds, and you want to be like really close, okay? Like between 7 feet and 3 yards. Now, I don't want, for the most part, me personally, I don't want like the whole torso to shoot at. I'm going to pick something to focus on that's a little bit easier to focus on, like the head area for a lot of targets, or just a bull itself if it's like a regular bullseye target. And then just bring the gun straight out, focus on the thing, and fire the shot. So here's what I'm going to do now. And we're nice and close, but I'm going to back up a little bit to about 3 yards. I'm going to make sure that that guy's squared up. Okay, you can see it. And I'm going to give you guys an angle so you can see it and me. So that's all we're going to do, is that we're just going to come straight out and we're going to fire the shot into the brain box area here. So just focusing on the target, both my eyes open, straight on the target, just focusing on him, just focusing on him. Okay, so just focusing on the target at 5 yards, those results ain't the worst in the world, okay? Now, I kind of screwed up my tape and stuff, but point is that I wasn't paying attention to that at all, and in all honesty, the tape flying off and all that wasn't all that difficult to have to deal with as far as being distracting, because I wasn't focusing on it. So we're going to try it again. And we're going to back up just a little bit, and I'm going to give you guys an angle that's easier to see. So I'm going to come out, I'm going to focus just on the target, just on the target, just on the target, just on the target. Now the cool thing is that the first round that I fired was indeed kind of high, right? But using that hand-eye coordination, I simply just kind of walked it down. Now, this isn't something that you're going to just instantly get, and it's not something that you're going to instantly be able to do. So there are a couple of things that I want to talk about here, just to go into a little bit greater detail on how to practice this efficiently and how to develop it as a technique set and have something else that you can take with you rather than only subscribing to one way. So a lot of you may have just written this off immediately and you were just kind of like, whatever dude, I'm not interested. And that's okay. That's okay. I mean, if we're all about focusing on those sights and stuff like that, it is a developed thing. And whether it's with like simunitions, or hopefully you're not learning this against real people, and hopefully you learn this while using like simunitions and stuff. But it's one of those things where it's like, if you train hard enough, for sure, you can pick up your sights, it's no big deal, and you can use them. But the point of this technique, and it's not like I'm preaching anything new here. This is not a new concept. It's never been a new concept. I just like it. Now, when is it appropriate to use this and when is it a liability? My thought process on this whole thing is that it's appropriate to use this inside of very close distances, and only you can really be the judge of what very close actually means. Okay? For instance, the second that you start to back up and your brain tells you that's kind of far for this, switch to your sights. It's that easy. If it's so close to where your brain's like, dude, this is close, okay, the sights might not be my priority here. You see what I'm saying? So how do we develop this to where what our brain tells us when we're quote close, or when we're quote far away enough to have to pick up our sights? Essentially, here's how this is developed. Okay, what you can do is that pick a light switch or something in the house, right? Actually, let me backpedal just a little bit. Get a flat white wall. And a lot of times we'll notice like little tiny details in the wall, like a little wrinkle here or whatever. When we see that, you focus on that tiny little detail, okay, on that white wall and stuff like that, and just focusing on that, draw the gun. Okay, and when you draw the gun, you focus on that and you keep focus on that, and then you draw attention to your sights. Okay, you want to check those sights to see where they're actually lined up. Now, I have a tendency to torque my gun a little bit this way. And for the longest time, like, my front sight was like way outside the rear sights, and I would have to groom myself on how to point the gun back into normal alignment. And you can actually see my tendency to torque the gun to the left a little bit on the target itself. Okay, first shot, once I backed up a little bit, was a little high right, and then I walked it back down just using hand-eye coordination. But what it does is that it builds on that hand-eye coordination to where once the gun comes up, you can figure out how aligned your sights are on that flat white wall, and then you can integrate other stuff into it afterwards. Like for instance, pick a light switch, okay? And that's the thing that you want to shoot at. Focus on just a light switch, like the corner of the flicky thing on the freaking light switch, the very corner of it. Draw the gun, focus just on that thing, and then focus on your sights. Once you focus on your sights, you can see about how far you would be away from the actual light switch if you were to take a shot. Okay, and what that does is that over time it helps you build that hand-eye coordination and how you naturally point the gun, to where this is now something to where instead of experiencing it for the first time while doing the force-on-force stuff, or unfortunately in a real shoot, instead of experiencing that for the first time there, why don't we develop the skill here so that when we encounter those things, those rounds that are being fired as liabilities are actually strengths. You see what I'm saying? It's just a way really to go about it, and over time, like if I'm having a really good day, I've shot on the move at 10 yards with just focusing on the target. And of course I'm going for like the upper thoracic area and stuff, but I'm doing well in here. It's not like I'm just shooting at like the whole silhouette and thinking that I'm doing good. I'm talking about inside the heart box area and still doing well. Okay, and if I'm having a bad day and I know it, you know, it's one of those things where it's like 10 yards, I need to use my sights for this. You see what I'm saying? So really it's a technique that you can use in all reality to help into like that close proximity type shooting. A lot of people have a lot of issues with close proximity shooting because it's the first time that they're encountering using their pistol, like actually pressing a trigger on it, and not using their sights. If you take it and bring it into your training regimen and figure out what your hand-eye coordination issues are and how to properly align that gun naturally, what it actually ends up helping you to do later on is that if we're trying to go faster, like a lot of us compete and stuff at the local or greater levels, so after a while you start to notice that there's no real having to fish in the front sight post. It's just pow, it's there, and it's so much more efficient, and it does help other things. This is a topic that I don't think is covered in enough schools and stuff like that, because I've been to a lot of them, and a lot of times this isn't even discussed, or it's lauded as awful or dangerous even. It's really not. You know, you guys have seen that there's a little bit of development in here and the shot group's fairly tight, but you do see that there's room for improvement like anything else that we groom as far as techniques are concerned. So I highly suggest that you guys check it out. If it's something that, Jesus Christ and that's, if it's something that you guys are like interested in and want to mold and stuff like that, fantastic. I'm glad that I helped. If not, that's fine. You know, developing your own personal fighting style and stuff like that that you can use in your own life is, there's a lot of personal decisions being made, you know, and a lot of people like to doctrinize things when all you have to simply do is consider what might be crazy to you. And a lot of times, a lot of things that I found to be kind of crazy or that didn't make sense are things that I flipped on later. You know, it's stuff that I would change my mind on later because my lifestyle would change or something, you know. So I hope I helped you guys out. If there's any questions on this or anything else, go ahead and throw it in the comments box below. If you want to check us out on like Patreon or whatever, I would suggest to go to the link provided in the description below. As a lot of you guys already know, there's a lot more slots opened up for the $35 a month limitless classes option and stuff like that. A lot of you guys have been waiting very, very patiently for the website, and it's one of those deals to where it's like before I announce August or further classes, I'll be announcing that and the website at the same time. It's getting real close. We ran into obviously a couple of roadblocks because this is beyond when I said it would be done as of today, but we're getting there, I promise. If you have any other questions or anything like that, you know, shoot them in the comments box below, or if you want to join our discussion page, we have a Facebook page and all that stuff. I'll provide a link for that also in the description below. And remember, guys, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.